Turkey's President Erdogan has signed off on Sweden's request to join NATO after the Turkish parliament's ratification of the bid earlier this week. The move comes 20 months after the Scandinavian country first applied to join the alliance in response to Russia's attack on Ukraine. And the reaction has been swift, especially in Washington. The White House sent a letter to top lawmakers urging Congress to approve a long-delayed F-16 fighter jet deal to Türkiye. Ankara has been trying to purchase 40 upgraded F-16s and dozens of modernization kits from Washington since 2021. But U.S. lawmakers insisted they would only consider the sale once Turkey approves Sweden's NATO accession. Both Sweden and Finland abandoned their decades of neutrality to join the alliance, citing Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Moscow, which criticized Finland's formal entry into NATO last year, called Ankara's approval of Sweden's bid a sovereign decision. With Turkiye's green light, Hungary remains the last hurdle to Sweden joining the alliance. And now to discuss Turkiye's approval of Sweden's NATO membership bid, joining me from Oslo is Glenn Diesen. He is a professor at the University of Southeastern Norway. And from Ankara, Tudor Onea, he is an assistant professor at Bilkent University. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Glenn, after a 20-month delay, the Turkish parliament has overwhelmingly approved Sweden's NATO bid. What do you make of it, and what's next for Sweden and, of course, the alliance?
Well, there was obviously a deal being made with Turkey, and I think that this will have huge significances for the alliance. I think it will also intensify the conflict to the point I think a war is becoming more likely with Russia now, because historically Western maritime powers have aimed to contain and weaken Russia by preventing its reliable access to international maritime corridors. So Russia has three main seas on its western borders, which is the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea, and up in the high north, the Arctic. So obviously the war in Ukraine was largely caused by NATO's attempt to make the Black Sea into a NATO lake by expelling them from Crimea. But what we see now, after with Finland and Sweden joining NATO, plus the US developing military base in Norway, we see this will enhance America's ability to control the Baltic Sea as well as the Arctic. So we're already hearing people talking about the Baltic Sea being converted into a NATO lake from the quite high up. And, this can have a huge impact. It can undermine Russia's commerce. It can also undermine its sovereignty and territorial integrity, as this can allow NATO to put pressure on Kaliningrad. And overall, I think it's a step towards making Scandinavia, converting it from being in this region of peace, which it was during the Cold War, to becoming a militarized frontline against Russia. So I would expect more pressure being mounted against Russia, and which would eventually provoke quite a forceful response, if not as forceful as Ukraine, at least, as we saw in Ukraine, at least a military response in some way or the other.
So would you agree, Tudor, because we know President Putin's visit to Kaliningrad, which borders Poland and the Baltics, came right after Turkey's ratification and Hungary's pending approval of Sweden's membership. Could this visit be construed as a message to NATO?
Oh, absolutely. This is, of course, this is not just, random. This is pretty much signaling, and I don't think that war is really in the cards. But what can be in the cards is definitely an arms race and militarization of that area. And probably with Russian nuclear deployments, and that would also be mirrored by developments on the NATO side. As to the importance of this deal, the real question is, could this have been done 20 months before, and has Turkey managed to win something in the meantime? And was it really worth it? And the answers here are both yes and no. To some degree, if the idea was to get the F-16 deal for this could have been done 20 months ago. But indeed, Turkey has actually gained something plus out of this deal, and this relates to the sanctions that were placed on drone parts by Canada and by the United States, and that are likely to be lifted in the aftermath of this deal.
So, Glenn, does this ratification mean all of Turkey's concerns regarding terrorism have been addressed by Sweden. And what do you think Turkey did gain by approving Sweden's bid?
Well, obviously there has been many achievements, and Turkey should be expected to look after its own interests. So I think there can be a few retentions if Turkey is not seen as blocking this. But at the same time, I also think because, well, obviously Sweden went to a great extent in accommodating Turkey's concerns. But at the same time, I would say now that Turkey effectively giving up its main bargaining chip,
Sure.
because one shouldn't look away from the fact that a lot of what Turkey has demanded from Sweden has not been received well there. Once that Turkey is given up on holding back Sweden's NATO membership, there's not really any more need to play nice with Turkey. So, and it's worth noting that they view a lot of the claims by Turkey as being largely illegitimate as well. So it's I think that on one hand it can improve ties, and they did get something from Sweden, but at the same time I think it will be short-lived. I think a lot of these tensions will then flare up again.
So, Tudor, a day after Turkey's ratification of Sweden's membership, U.S. President Joe Biden has sent a letter to Congress urging them to quickly approve a 20 billion sale of F-16 fighter jets to Turkey. So what's next? I mean, next, is it going to be an easy process, or there are going to be some challenges?
I don't foresee a lot of complications. Originally, one of the problem was that Congress was placing a number of conditions on this deal, particularly, on the use of F-16 and, the possibility of overflight of Greece. And I think this is going to be dropped without any sort of further issues. So I believe that indeed that the deal will go through. So this is not just about, of course, just the acquisition of new F-16s, but also about acquiring modernization kits, which, as far as I understand, concern particularly the avionics of Turkey's existing fleet of F-16s.
So, Glenn, what do you think? Could the U.S. condition their sale to Turkey on the steps discouraging overflights of Greek territory? And if so, how do you think Ankara will respond?
Well, I would be careful to speculate on this, but I think that the Turkish relations with the U.S. on this has been similar to what it had been with Sweden, which is the U.S. had been hesitant to supply them. Now, obviously, once this has gone through and Turkey no longer has the same bargaining power, it's of course possible that the U.S. could set more conditions, such as the restrictions on overflight over Greek islands. But it's unclear how Turkey would respond, of course. But I assume that there are political forces within Washington who are more willing to pull back on any promises given to Turkey. Because keep in mind, the U.S. and Turkey has a lot of other conflicting interests, especially in Syria with different Kurdish groups. So this could yet again be used as a bargaining chip, that is the F-16, in its disagreements with Turkey.
So, Tudor, do we know the exact reasons behind Hungary's opposition to Sweden's membership to NATO?
Well, this is, the realm of speculation, but mostly it's actually payback. It's payback for a number of, criticisms of Hungary, and particularly, the quality of a liberal democracy in Hungary. And so this is pretty much, the occasion when, Hungary has Sweden over a barrel, and the idea is to actually inflict a cost, pretty much spite them as much as possible. But of course, since Hungary right now is the last holdover in the alliance, it will probably decide to get along at some point and vote, and to also confirm Sweden's status.
So, Glenn, the US and NATO have expressed satisfaction over Turkey's decision, and they will most likely do the same with Hungary's future decision, let's say. So is this a win for the Biden administration?
Yeah, I think so, because obviously Hungary, it will eventually fold. It's not going to keep out the position anymore now that it lost Turkey along the way. But it depends to be seen whether or not this is a victory. Of course, Biden wanted to weaken an adversary. It wanted more loyalty from its allies. So from this perspective, I think it is a victory. But, I would keep in mind that we've been here before. Almost 400 years ago, in 1617, with this Treaty of Stolbova, where Sweden was able to get full control over the Baltic Sea, making it a Swedish lake effectively, and controlling it from so Russia wouldn't have an independent accent. Now, what we later saw is Russia broke out of isolation through military force. So, of course, the UK and US have similarly tried to contain Russia by limiting its waterways. But again, one shouldn't expect any capitulation coming forward. So it depends how we would define victory. I think, again, it will it will be good for power, relative power vis-a-vis Russia, but overall, I think it will not be good for stability, peace. But of course, it's good to have more allies, which will do as they're told.
So, Tudor, what do you think? Could the Baltics become the next hot spots between Russia and NATO? And how would Sweden's membership in the military alliance change the security structure of the alliance? And how would it contribute to the European and global security?
First of all, the Baltics has always been one of the clashing points. I mean, geopolitically, it's not very difficult to see why. It controls, the exit for the Baltic Sea for Russia. We are talking here about Latvia and Estonia, and since its their admission to NATO, which by the way happened during President Putin's time in office, this has been an issue. It's not the only issue. It's not necessarily even the most worrisome geopolitical point of clash between NATO and Russia. That would be the Suwalki Gap between Kaliningrad and Belarus, and which might trigger a clash with Poland. What I would caution against is this talk about this being, the Baltics becoming essentially a NATO lake, because this is geography for the insane. Kaliningrad is still Russia. There is also a part of the Baltic Sea which actually belongs to Russia, where the Baltic Sea is actually, headquartered. So that's actually a big challenge, right, to the idea that this is absolutely something universally that NATO controls. As for what's going to happen in the future, well, this is definitely it's a defeat for Russia, because it's something that Russia didn't want to happen and that has happened. But that in the big equation of things, it's not going to change much. A war between NATO and Russia is still unlikely to happen, because in case if it does happen, it's going to be a nuclear war. And this is something that neither side has an interest in fighting.
Sure. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.